My name is Elaine Walker, and at 29, I was drowning in student debt and barely making rent as an accountant in Chicago. I come from a family that treats relatives like ATMs. My mother Jessica with her endless emergencies, gambling father Raymond, my entrepreneur brother Keith who never succeeds, and my influencer sister Amber. Everything changed when I checked my lottery ticket and discovered I'd won $47 million. In that heart-stopping moment, I made a decision that would save my life. Tell absolutely no one in my family. Before I tell you how this decision changed my entire life, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever fantasized about a windfall that would solve all your problems. I was living in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the north side of Chicago, with rent that ate nearly half of my monthly income. The place had paper-thin walls, temperamental plumbing, and a landlord who considered maintenance requests as optional suggestions. Still, it was mine, and I decorated it with second-hand furniture and plants to make it feel like home. As a mid-level accountant at Roberts & Klein Financial, I was putting in 50-hour weeks, including regular weekend overtime during tax season. My salary was decent on paper, $62,000 a year, but after taxes, my crushing student loan payments, and the high cost of city living, I was perpetually watching my bank account dwindle to double digits before each payday. My car was a 2008 Toyota Corolla with 187,000 miles that needed a new something or other every few months. The most recent repair had cost $780 I couldn't spare, forcing me to put it on a credit card that was already approaching its limit. Each morning, I'd whisper, "Please start," before turning the key, a desperate prayer to the automotive gods. I was doing everything right, budgeting carefully, packing lunches, limiting my social life to the occasional happy hour with discounted drinks. But financial security felt like a mirage that kept receding into the distance no matter how hard I worked toward it. My family situation made everything exponentially worse. We weren't just dysfunctional, we were financially toxic. My mother Jessica was perpetually in some state of financial crisis. One month it was unexpected medical bills, despite having insurance. The next it was property taxes she'd somehow forgotten to budget for, or car repairs, or home renovations that mysteriously ballooned in cost. She divorced my father when I was 16, but never quite figured out how to live within her means. Every conversation inevitably led to money. Specifically, her lack of it and how families should help each other out. My father Raymond was even worse. A compulsive gambler, he'd walked out when I was 12 after emptying our college funds and taking a second mortgage on the family home. He'd reappear periodically, usually when he needed somewhere to stay or money to get back on his feet. He was charming and full of big promises about paying everyone back once his luck turned around. It never did. My brother Keith, at 32, had started and failed at 7 different businesses. There was the sports memorabilia shop that closed within 6 months, the food truck that never passed inspection, the cryptocurrency investment scheme, the dropshipping venture, the podcast network, the mobile detailing service, and most recently, an app for dog walkers that never made it past the development stage. Each failure was never his fault. It was the economy, or unfair competition, or partners who didn't share his vision. Each venture began with him hitting up family members for seed money and ended with shrugged shoulders and plans for the next big thing. My sister Amber, 26, was an aspiring influencer who maintained the appearance of success while accumulating credit card debt. Her Instagram showed brunches at trendy restaurants, weekend trips to coastal cities, and an endless rotation of fashionable outfits. What her followers didn't see were the maxed-out credit cards, the rent she frequently couldn't make, and the loans she requested from family members for business expenses, like a new camera or lighting equipment. She called these requests investments in her brand. My cousin Megan, Aunt Patricia's daughter, wasn't looking for money directly, but she turned every interaction into a competition. Her house was bigger, her car was newer, her vacations were more exotic. She'd ask pointed questions about my salary or casually mention her husband's recent bonus. Every achievement I mentioned was met with something grander from her life. and any financial struggle was met with thinly veiled judgment about my career choices. Hovering over it all was Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, who served as the family's information clearinghouse. Any personal detail, especially financial, would be transmitted throughout the extended family with near light speed. She'd somehow made it her mission to know and share everyone's business, framing it as concern while clearly enjoying the power it gave her. Family history had taught me painful lessons about money. When I was 17, I'd worked double shifts at a local diner all summer to save for college. I'd accumulated nearly $3,000. Not enough for tuition, but enough for books and supplies. My mother had borrowed it for Keith's first business venture, promising they'd pay me back with interest. They never did, and when I brought it up years later, I was told to stop living in the past and that family helps family. During my senior year of college, I'd received a $5,000 scholarship for academic achievement. Somehow, this became classified as family money, with my mother guilting me into using most of it to help Amber with her car payment and insurance after she'd been laid off. Your sister needs to get to job interviews, was the reasoning, though Amber seemed in no hurry to find employment. Even small windfalls became common property. Tax returns, work bonuses, even the $500 I'd won in an office raffle had been earmarked for family emergencies before the money had even reached my account. The pattern was clear. Any money I had was viewed as a resource for the family to tap. These experiences had shaped my relationship with money in profound ways. I tracked every penny, hidden in private spreadsheets and budget apps my family didn't know about. I had secret savings accounts they weren't aware of, though the balances were modest. I lived with constant financial anxiety, not just about my own needs, but from the pressure of being seen as a resource rather than a person. I was the responsible one, the person family members turn to because you're so good with money, which really meant you have some we can use. Through it all, I harbored a secret dream of financial independence. Not wealth necessarily, just enough security that I wouldn't panic if my car broke down or my rent increased. I wanted enough of a buffer that I could sleep at night without money worries intruding. It seemed like an impossible fantasy. The day before everything changed was actually a family dinner at my mother's house. Keith was launching business venture number 8, something to do with NFTs and virtual real estate, and needed just $10,000 to get it off the ground. Amber needed new video editing software that cost only $2,000 for her growing YouTube channel. My father was passing through town and hinted about needing a place to stay for just a few weeks until a big opportunity came through in Minneapolis. I sat at that dinner table, picking at my food, watching them all discuss money, my money, as if it were already theirs. I had $6,342 in my savings account, earmarked for emergency expenses, and possibly a certification course that could help me advance at work. By the end of the night, they'd mentally spent all of it and were disappointed I couldn't contribute more. I drove home that night with a knot in my stomach, wondering if this would be my life forever, working myself to exhaustion, only to have any progress immediately claimed by family obligations. I had no idea that the universe was about to present me with both an incredible opportunity and an impossible dilemma. On my way home from work the following Tuesday, I stopped at the 7-Eleven on Belmont Avenue. It was my usual routine, picking up a Diet Coke and occasionally a lottery ticket when the jackpot was high. The Powerball was at $380 million, and on impulse, I'd spent $10 on tickets the previous week. I normally didn't even remember to check if I'd won, often finding old tickets in coat pockets or at the bottom of my purse weeks later. That day, however, something made me hand the tickets to the cashier to scan. I was actually turning to leave when he said, "Whoa, hang on. The machine's saying you need to contact the lottery commission. I think you won something big." My heart did a strange little stutter. "Maybe a few $100s?" I asked, already mentally allocating the unexpected money to my car's upcoming oil change. The cashier shrugged. "Could be. Or could be more. You'll need to check the numbers." I thanked him and hurried out to my car. With shaking hands, I pulled up the lottery results on my phone and compared them to my ticket. First number matched. Second number matched. Third, fourth, fifth. Even the Powerball number matched. All of them. Every single number. I couldn't breathe. The world narrowed to just my ticket and my phone screen. I checked 3 more times, convinced I was misreading something. But the truth was right there in my hands. I had a ticket worth millions of dollars. I don't know how long I sat there in the 7-Eleven parking lot, hyperventilating. At some point, I started crying, silent tears streaming down my face as I tried to process what was happening. My whole body was shaking. I felt disconnected from reality, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. My first coherent thought was to call my mother. My hand actually reached for my phone before a second thought stopped me cold. What happened every time I got money? In rapid succession, I saw mental images. Keith's failed businesses, Amber's investments, my mother's emergencies, my father's promises. I thought about what they would do with millions. The businesses that would fail spectacularly, the spending that would spiral out of control, the relatives who would appear from the woodwork, the inevitable financial collapse that would follow the initial euphoria. I put my phone down. I needed to think. I drove home in a daze, hands clenched so tightly on the steering wheel that my knuckles were white. The ticket was in my wallet, and I was suddenly paranoid about car accidents, muggings, or spontaneous wallet combustion. I parked in my assigned spot, ran up to my apartment, and locked the door behind me. Only then did I allow myself to check the numbers one more time. The jackpot was $380 million. The lump sum option would be around $220 million. After taxes, I would have approximately $147 million. If I took the annuity, I would receive the full amount, less taxes, over 30 years. $147 million. A number so large my mind couldn't grasp it. I spent hours that night researching lottery winners. What I found was sobering. Stories of winners who were bankrupt within a few years. Families torn apart by money disputes. People hounded by constant requests from friends, family, and strangers. The lottery curse wasn't just a myth. It was a documented pattern of ruined lives. One article in particular caught my attention. It profiled a lottery winner who had waited 6 months to tell anyone about his winnings, using that time to set up legal and financial protections. He was one of the few who still had his fortune years later. He was also still on speaking terms with his family. I stayed up until 4 a.m. reading everything I could find about sudden wealth, family dynamics around money, and lottery best practices. By morning, I had a headache, red eyes, and the beginnings of a plan. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did. I couldn't face normal life knowing what was in my wallet. I needed advice, but I had to be careful about who I told. After much consideration, I texted Dr. Marshall, my favorite professor from college who taught financial ethics. We had stayed in touch over the years, and I trusted both his expertise and his discretion. Need urgent financial advice of a personal nature. Can I buy you coffee today? It's important. He agreed to meet me at a quiet cafe far from campus where we wouldn't run into students. When I arrived, he was already there, his salt and pepper beard and kind eyes instantly calming my frayed nerves. After swearing him to secrecy, I told him everything. He listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly serious. "Elaine," he said when I finished, "this is life-changing money, and not always in good ways. The statistics for lottery winners are grim. The biggest mistake people make is telling others before they have protections in place. So you think I'm right to keep it from my family?" I asked, desperate for validation. "Temporarily, yes. This isn't about trust or love. It's about giving yourself time to set up proper structures. Once the money is gone, it's gone. Once relationships are damaged, they may never recover. Take your time and do this right." He recommended a financial advisor named Natalie Wong who specialized in sudden wealth scenarios. "She's discreet and ethical. Tell her I sent you, and she'll fit you in quickly." That afternoon, I met with Natalie in her downtown office. She was a sharp, efficient woman in her 40s who took one look at my ticket and immediately had me place it in her office safe. "First things first," she said. "We need to create a financial fortress around you before you claim this money. And we need to decide whether to take the lump sum or annuity." After discussing the pros and cons, I decided on the lump sum. "With proper investment," she explained, "I could likely exceed the total annuity amount while maintaining control of my assets. More importantly, it would give me flexibility if my family situation became complicated." "Now for the harder question," she said. "Who knows about this win?" "Just my former professor and you," I replied. She nodded approvingly. "Keep it that way for now. Don't tell family, friends, or coworkers until we have your claiming strategy and wealth management plan in place." "And Elaine? This is going to be more emotionally challenging than you can imagine. Consider working with a therapist who specializes in major life transitions." I left Natalie's office with a to-do list and my ticket secured in her safe. My mind was racing with a mix of excitement and anxiety. I had an appointment with an attorney specializing in lottery winners the next day, and Natalie had already begun researching trust structures. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Keith needs to borrow your car tomorrow for a meeting with investors. Important opportunity. Let him pick it up at 9. No question. No consideration of my needs. Just an assumption that family requirements trumped my own." For the first time, I felt something shift inside me. I texted back, "Sorry, I need my car for work." No elaborate excuse. No guilty justification. Just a simple boundary. Her reply was immediate. "He can drop you at work first." This meeting could change everything for him. I turned my phone off and drove home. The 6-month timeline I had given myself suddenly felt both impossibly long and critically necessary. I was afraid of what would happen when my family eventually found out, but I was more afraid of what would happen if I told them now. That night, I hid the ticket receipt, Natalie had the actual ticket, in a sealed envelope inside a box of tampons. The one place I knew none of my family members would ever look. Then I lay awake, alternating between dreams of freedom and nightmares of discovery, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake or the wisest decision of my life. The attorney Natalie recommended was Rebecca Goldstein, a specialist in what she called wealth privacy strategies. Her office was in a nondescript building with excellent security, and her manner was both brisk and reassuring. "Illinois lottery winners' names are public record," she explained during our first meeting. "There's no getting around that. But we can minimize your exposure and protect your privacy in other ways." She outlined a strategy. Create an LLC or trust with a generic name to claim the prize, use a different address for all lottery-related correspondence, and prepare for the required public announcement with minimal personal details revealed. "I recommend the blind trust route," Rebecca said. "We'll create an entity with a name that gives nothing away, something like Northern Illinois Trust. The trust will be the official winner, with you as the beneficiary. Your name will appear in the records if someone digs deep enough, but it creates a layer of separation." The legal work was complex and expensive, but I didn't hesitate. Rebecca helped me establish the Northern Illinois Trust, with additional privacy structures layered in. We used a P.O. box for the address and prepared a minimal statement for the required press conference. The beneficiary wishes to remain as private as possible and has no statement at this time. Meanwhile, Natalie had arranged meetings with various financial specialists, investment advisors, tax specialists, insurance experts, and estate planners. I took copious notes during each meeting, my accountant's mind appreciating the complex structures being created to protect and grow my wealth. The lottery officials were predictably bureaucratic. There were forms to complete, identifications to verify, and stern warnings about the responsibilities of suddenly having millions. I opted for minimal publicity, though they warned me that my name would be in public records and likely picked up by local news. 2 weeks after finding out I'd won, the Northern Illinois Trust officially claimed the Powerball prize of $147 million after taxes. There was a small press conference which my lawyer attended on behalf of the trust. I watched the news coverage from my apartment. Surreal as it was to see my life-changing win reduced to a 20-second segment on the evening news. The $380 million Powerball jackpot has been claimed by the Northern Illinois Trust. Lottery officials say the winning ticket was purchased at a 7-Eleven in Chicago. The winner has chosen to remain anonymous, though public records indicate the trust beneficiary is an Illinois resident. That was it. No mention of my name, no cameras outside my apartment. Still, I jumped at every noise for the next few days, certain that somehow, someone would figure it out. The local news stations ran segments speculating about the mysterious winner. One channel interviewed customers at the 7-Eleven where I'd purchased the ticket. "I hope it's someone who needs it," said one elderly man. "Not some rich person who already has everything. If only he knew." The next Sunday, I attended my usual monthly family dinner at my mother's house. My stomach was in knots as I walked in, certain my face would somehow give away my secret. My mother was in the kitchen stirring a pot of pasta sauce. "Did you hear about that lottery winner?" she asked casually. "Almost 400 million, and they're not even coming forward properly. Must be something shady going on." I nearly dropped the bottle of wine I'd brought. "Oh?" I managed, my voice only slightly higher than normal. "I hadn't heard." "It was on the news," Keith said, walking in and immediately opening the wine. "Some trust claimed it. Tax evasion, probably." "What would you do with that kind of money?" my sister Amber asked, not looking up from her phone where she was undoubtedly documenting this family dinner for her followers. "Pay off my debts," my mother said immediately. "Buy a house somewhere warm. Set you kids up for life. Start a real venture capital fund," Keith said, pouring himself a generous glass of my wine. "I've got a list of startups that would be worth billions with the right investment." "Travel the world," Amber chimed in. "Build my brand internationally. Maybe buy a house in Bali for content creation retreats." "What about you, Elaine?" my mother asked. For a moment, I panicked. Did she suspect something? But her expression was merely curious. "I'd probably just invest most of it," I said carefully. "Maybe travel a bit." Keith snorted. "Boring. That's why you should give your money to someone who knows how to enjoy it." The conversation moved on, but I remained on edge throughout dinner. It was strange hearing them discuss what they'd do with money that was, unknown to them, actually mine. Their plans confirmed my decision to keep the win private. None of them mentioned financial security, long-term planning, or philanthropy. It was all immediate consumption and risky ventures. As I was leaving, I nearly had a heart attack when I ran into Aunt Linda in the parking lot. I hadn't known she was coming by, and she was the last person I wanted to see given my current situation. "Elaine! What a coincidence!" she exclaimed. "I was just at the financial center across the street." The financial center, where I'd had a meeting with Natalie just 2 days ago. "Oh?" I tried to sound casual. "Everything okay?" "Just some questions about my retirement account," she said, eyeing me curiously. "What brings you to this neighborhood?" "Your mother's house is on the other side of town." My mind raced. "Work," I blurted out. "Client meeting nearby. Thought I'd stop by Mom's since I was in the area." "On a Sunday?" Her eyebrows rose. "Tax season preparations," I said, the lie feeling clumsy on my tongue. "Anyway, I should get going. Early start tomorrow." I practically ran to my car, feeling her eyes on my back. Had she seen me at the financial center? Did she suspect something? Aunt Linda had an uncanny ability to sniff out secrets, and I'd just given her reason to be curious. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining scenarios where my family discovered my secret. Would they be hurt? Angry? Would they try to contest the trust legally? The stress was already taking a toll. I had dark circles under my eyes. I'd lost 5 pounds, and I jumped every time my phone rang. The worst part was feeling isolated. I couldn't talk to my usual support system, my family, about the biggest thing happening in my life. I was living a double life, and the strain of keeping the two separate was harder than I'd anticipated. The excitement of the win was being overshadowed by the anxiety of discovery and the guilt of secrecy. Still, when I received the first statement showing my trust's investment portfolio, I felt a wave of relief. The structures were working. The money was secure. I just needed to hold on to my secret a little longer until everything was firmly in place. But as the weeks passed, the strain of my double life only grew. I was building a financial fortress in secret while maintaining the appearance of my normal, paycheck-to-paycheck existence. How long could I keep up the facade before something had to give? With the claiming process complete, I now faced the challenge of actually managing my newfound wealth. Natalie had assembled a team of financial professionals to help me create a comprehensive plan, something I came to call my wealth constitution. The goal, Natalie explained during a lengthy Saturday meeting, is to create a framework that will guide your financial decisions for decades to come. This isn't just about what stocks to buy. It's about your values, goals, and the legacy you want to create. We began with the fundamentals. A significant portion of my winnings, about $70 million, went into a diversified investment portfolio designed for long-term growth. Another $30 million was allocated to more conservative investments focused on generating reliable income. The remaining $47 million was divided between cash reserves, real estate investments, and funds earmarked for potential business ventures and philanthropy. The tax implications were complex and somewhat painful. Beyond the initial withholding, there would be ongoing tax obligations from investment income, property, and other sources. We established relationships with specialized accountants who could navigate these waters, setting aside appropriate reserves for future tax payments. I created a detailed budget for my personal expenses. Ironically, as an accountant, this was the part I felt most comfortable with. I decided on an annual salary of $250,000 to start, an amount that would allow me to live very comfortably without being excessive. This would be drawn from the income generated by my investments rather than touching the principal. We discussed estate planning, something I'd never considered at 29. I had no children or spouse, but I wanted to ensure my assets would be protected and distributed according to my wishes if something happened to me. I drafted a will and established additional trusts, carefully considering which family members to include and under what conditions. The technical aspects of wealth management were challenging but straightforward. The emotional aspects were far more difficult. I experienced what Natalie called sudden wealth syndrome, a set of psychological and emotional responses to receiving a large amount of money unexpectedly. I felt overwhelmed by options, paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes, and strangely guilty about my good fortune. "It's normal," Natalie assured me. "You're dealing with numbers and responsibilities that your brain isn't wired to process easily. Plus, you're carrying the additional burden of secrecy." She recommended a therapist who specialized in financial psychology, Dr. Claire Bennett. I began weekly sessions, discussing the complex emotions surrounding my win and my family dynamics. "You're managing two significant stressors," Dr. Bennett observed during our third session. "The adjustment to sudden wealth, which is challenging for anyone, and the strain of keeping it secret from the people closest to you. It's no wonder you're feeling overwhelmed." We worked on strategies for coping with the stress and guilt. I was particularly struggling with the fact that I could now easily solve my family's financial problems, but was choosing not to. "Consider the difference between helping and enabling," Dr. Bennett suggested. "Based on what you've shared about your family's patterns, would giving them money now likely lead to lasting positive change, or would it reinforce problematic behaviors?" This question stayed with me, especially as I continued to navigate family interactions. About 3 months after my win, Keith called asking to borrow $3,000 for a guaranteed return investment opportunity that was time-sensitive. "It's a sure thing, Elaine," he insisted. "I've done all the research. $3,000 now will turn into at least $9,000 within 3 months. My old self would have either reluctantly agreed or spent hours feeling guilty for saying no. Now, with $147 million secretly at my disposal, the temptation to simply give him the money was almost overwhelming. What was $3,000 to me now? But Dr. Bennett's question echoed in my mind. Would this help or enable? Given Keith's history, I knew the answer. "I can't right now, Keith," I said firmly. "My budget is tight this month." His reaction was predictably explosive. "You always have money for your precious emergency fund or whatever, but never to help family. This could be my big break, and you're too selfish to see it." The conversation ended with him hanging up on me. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by financial statements showing millions in assets, feeling simultaneously guilty and certain I'd made the right decision. My family began to notice changes in my behavior, subtle though I tried to be. I was less available for impromptu financial emergencies. I seemed less stressed about money in general, which they found suspicious rather than positive. I occasionally mentioned doing better at work to explain my slightly improved circumstances, but I was careful not to overplay this. Setting up the infrastructure for my new financial reality while maintaining my old life required extraordinary organization. I established new bank accounts with different institutions than I'd previously used. I got a second phone exclusively for financial matters. I rented a P.O. box for financial mail. I found a secure storage facility for important documents. I created elaborate systems to keep my two lives separate. My original email remained for normal correspondence, while a new one handled financial communications. I kept a detailed log of what I told to whom, afraid of contradicting myself and raising suspicions. I even developed different passwords for my regular accounts versus my wealth-related ones, using an entirely different pattern to reduce the risk of cross-contamination. Despite my precautions, there were close calls. About 4 months after my win, my mother dropped by my apartment unexpectedly while I was reviewing some trust documents. I barely had time to shove the papers into a drawer before she walked in, using the key I'd given her for emergencies only. "What was that?" she asked, noticing my flustered movement. "Just some work I brought home," I said, trying to sound casual, helping a high net worth client with tax planning. She seemed to accept this, but I noticed her eyes lingering on the drawer. The incident prompted me to rent a small office where I could review financial matters in complete privacy, away from surprise visits. As I approached the halfway point of my 6-month timeline, I found myself reflecting on how the money had already changed me, even though my external circumstances remained largely the same. I stood straighter. I spoke more confidently. I set boundaries without elaborate explanations or apologies. The constant background anxiety about financial disaster had disappeared, allowing me to sleep better and think more clearly. Most significantly, my perspective on my family had shifted. Without the pressure of financial dependence, I could see their patterns more objectively. I still loved them, but I recognized how unhealthy many of our interactions had been. Money hadn't created these dynamics. It had merely revealed what was already there. I began to wonder if I would ever tell them about my win. My original plan had been to use the 6 months to prepare, then reveal everything with proper protections in place. But as I observed their behaviors from my new perspective, I questioned whether any amount of preparation would make that revelation constructive. What I didn't realize was that events would soon force my hand, testing my resolve and my newfound financial confidence in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Maintaining my regular job became increasingly surreal. Each morning, I'd wake up, check investment reports showing millions in assets, then drive to my middle-income accounting job, where I'd spend the day helping clients save for modest retirements or reduce their tax burdens by a few $1,000s. I could have quit, of course. With $147 million, I never needed to work another day in my life. But keeping my job was crucial to my cover story. A sudden, unexplained departure would raise questions I wasn't prepared to answer. So I continued showing up, performing my duties, and accepting my paycheck with a strange mix of amusement and guilt. My coworkers began to notice subtle changes. I was calmer during tight deadlines, less anxious about performance reviews, and occasionally made small purchases that would have been out of character before. A nicer work bag, lunch from the more expensive cafe down the street. "You seem different lately," my cubicle neighbor Sophia remarked one day. "More relaxed." "Just been meditating," I lied, adding another falsehood to the growing pile. And I've been better about work-life balance. When my immediate supervisor, Dan, commented on my changed demeanor, I attributed it to therapy, which wasn't entirely untrue, and a slight medication adjustment, which was completely fabricated. I hated the deception, but saw no alternative that wouldn't risk exposing my secret. I strategically implemented small improvements to my visible lifestyle, always with a plausible explanation ready. I negotiated a rent decrease on my apartment. I actually paid the same, but it explained why I seemed less stressed about housing costs. I found a great mechanic who gave me a deal on fixing my car. True, though I could now afford proper repairs without wincing. I mentioned a small promotion that didn't actually exist to explain new clothes and occasional restaurant meals. Each of these changes was carefully calibrated to be believable within my known income. I didn't buy a new car or suddenly take exotic vacations. I didn't move to a luxury apartment. I lived essentially the same life, just with slightly fewer visible financial stresses. The psychological toll of maintaining these deceptions was substantial. I constantly monitored my words, afraid of slipping and mentioning something I shouldn't know about or couldn't explain. I rehearsed cover stories before family gatherings. I maintained separate calendars for my regular life appointments and my wealth management meetings, paranoid about double booking. Dr. Claire, my therapist, became an essential support. Our weekly sessions provided the only space where I could be completely honest about both aspects of my life. What you're experiencing is similar to what undercover agents report, she explained during one particularly difficult session when I broke down over the constant lying. It's called compartmentalization stress. Your brain is working overtime to maintain separate narratives, which is cognitively and emotionally exhausting. We developed coping strategies, mindfulness techniques to stay present, journaling to privately process my thoughts, and brief honesty breaks where I could go somewhere private and simply speak the truth aloud to myself. Despite these supports, the double life took its toll. I developed insomnia, grinding my teeth so severely at night that I needed a mouthguard. I had frequent headaches and occasional anxiety attacks. The wealth that should have brought freedom instead felt like an elaborate trap of my own making. My relationships suffered too. Friends noticed I was more distant, less available. I declined social invitations because I was afraid of slipping up after a few drinks. I avoided dating entirely. The thought of navigating romantic intimacy while maintaining such a significant secret seemed impossible. Family relationships became particularly strained. My decreased willingness to participate in their financial emergencies was interpreted as selfishness rather than boundary setting. My mother made pointed comments about how I'd changed and become too focused on yourself. My siblings were more directly accusatory, especially Keith after I refused his investment opportunity. You used to care about family, Amber said during a particularly tense dinner, 4 months after my win. Now it's like you've got some secret life you think is more important. The irony of her accuracy was painful. Approximately 5 months into my secret millionaire existence, my mother dropped by my apartment unannounced again, a habit I was increasingly resenting. I had been careless, leaving a financial statement on my kitchen table while I went to answer the door. By the time I returned from the bathroom where she'd excused herself, the statement was in a slightly different position. My heart raced. Had she seen it? Had she understood what it was? The statement wasn't obviously connected to the lottery winnings. It was from one of the many investment accounts I'd established, but it clearly showed a balance in the millions. Everything okay? I asked, casually moving the paper into a drawer. Fine, she said, her expression unreadable. Just helping a client with their finances? Like last time I stopped by? Something like that, I said, feeling the familiar strain of deception. Work has me handling some bigger accounts lately. She nodded slowly. That's good. Moving up in the world. The conversation moved to other topics, but tension lingered in the air. After she left, I analyzed every word and expression, trying to determine if she suspected something. That night, I moved every financial document to my private office space, unwilling to risk another discovery. The incident accelerated my timeline for making major life changes. I'd been planning to stay in my current situation for at least another few months, but the strain was becoming unbearable. I needed to transition to a life that would accommodate my new financial reality without exposing the full truth. I began researching cities where I might relocate, places far enough from Chicago to make regular visits from family less likely, but not so far as to make the move seem suspicious. I thought about career changes that could plausibly explain an improved lifestyle. I considered what parts of my secret could potentially be revealed without exposing the whole truth. As I reached the 5-month mark of my double life, I found myself at a crossroads. The structures to protect my wealth were firmly in place. I had a solid financial education and team of advisors. The immediate publicity around the lottery win had faded. Technically, I could continue indefinitely as I was working my regular job, living my modest lifestyle, secretly being worth millions. But the cost to my mental health and relationships was becoming unsustainable. Something would have to change, and soon. What I didn't realize was that events were already in motion that would force that change in ways I couldn't control. 6 months after my lottery win, just as I was finalizing plans for a controlled transition to a slightly more comfortable lifestyle, a family emergency threw everything into chaos. My father Raymond suddenly reappeared after nearly a year's absence, showing up at my mother's house with a black eye, a limp, and a story about dangerous people looking for him because of gambling debts. "They're serious guys, connected guys," he explained at the hastily called family meeting. "They've already roughed me up once as a warning. Next time will be worse." He claimed to owe $76,000 to loan sharks associated with an underground poker game. The story had the familiar Raymond elements: bad luck, unfair treatment, and a timeline that made immediate action necessary. "They've given me 2 weeks to come up with the money," he said, his voice trembling perfectly. "After that, well, I might need to disappear permanently, if you know what I mean." My mother was already in tears. Keith was pacing and brainstorming aloud. Amber was photographing our father's injuries for evidence, but suspiciously using the dramatic lighting settings on her phone. Aunt Linda had somehow been included and was calling other relatives before we'd even discussed a plan. "We need to pool our resources," my mother announced, wiping her eyes. "This is family. We take care of our own." A quick calculation around the table. My mother could contribute $3,200 from her emergency fund. Keith had about $1,000 he could access. Amber had nothing liquid but offered to sell some designer items. Aunt Linda would ask Uncle Bob for $5,000. Various other relatives were expected to contribute smaller amounts. Then all eyes turned to me. "You've always been good with saving," my mother said. "And you got that promotion recently. We're counting on you for at least $20,000, Elaine." The room fell silent, waiting for my response. 6 months ago, I would have panicked, then eventually agreed to empty my savings and put the rest on credit cards. Now, I had a different perspective, and $147 million I couldn't explain. "I need to think about this," I said carefully. "Something doesn't add up." "What's to think about?" Keith demanded. "This is Dad's life we're talking about." "I understand that," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "But I've never heard of loan sharks giving a 2-week grace period. And how did they let the debt get so high before taking action? I'd like to better understand the situation before committing my savings." My mother was aghast. "Since when do you question family in need?" "I'm not questioning family," I clarified. "I'm questioning the story and trying to make a responsible decision." The meeting deteriorated from there. I was called selfish, cold, untrusting. My father looked wounded by my suspicion. My mother couldn't believe I'd changed so much. Through it all, I maintained that I needed time to consider and would let them know my decision the next day. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. The firm came recommended by Rebecca, my attorney, as discreet and thorough. I explained the situation and authorized a quick background check on my father's recent activities. The results came back the next afternoon, confirming my suspicions. My father had indeed been gambling, but there was no evidence of loan shark involvement. Instead, he had been seen meeting with a woman in her 30s multiple times over the past month. The investigator found travel booking confirmations for two to Cancun, departing in 3 weeks, paid for from an account in my father's name. The dangerous people story appeared to be entirely fabricated. I confronted my father privately, showing him the investigator's report. His transformation was immediate, from wounded victim to angry accuser. "You had me investigated? Your own father?" he shouted. "What kind of daughter does that?" "The kind who's tired of being lied to," I responded, surprised by my own calmness. "There are no loan sharks, are there? This is about your girlfriend and a vacation." He deflated slightly, shifting tactics. "Okay, so I met someone. She makes me happy. Is that so wrong? And yes, I wanted to take her somewhere nice. The money wasn't just for that. I do have some debts to pay off too, but nothing life-threatening. Why not just ask honestly?" He laughed bitterly. "Would you have given me the money if I had?" "No," I admitted. "Probably not." Exactly. Sometimes a story is kinder than the truth. I left that conversation with a clarity I hadn't expected. The patterns were so obvious now. The manipulation, the emotional leverage, the carefully crafted stories designed to extract maximum financial support. I decided I would not contribute to my father's emergency fund. What I hadn't anticipated was my family's reaction to my refusal. I became the villain of the narrative. My mother called in tears, saying she'd raised a daughter with no heart. Keith sent angry texts accusing me of wanting our father to suffer. Amber posted vague social media content about toxic family members who only care about themselves. Aunt Linda began spreading stories about how I'd abandoned the family in a crisis. The situation escalated when Keith showed up at my apartment unannounced, demanding an explanation. "I don't get it, Elaine," he said, pacing my living room. "You've always helped before. What's changed? Why now, when it's so important?" "Because it's not actually an emergency," I explained. "Dad made up the story about loan sharks. He wants the money for a vacation with his new girlfriend." Keith dismissed this. "So what? Maybe he deserves some happiness. Maybe if we all helped, he could pay off some actual debts and take this trip. Why is that so wrong?" "Because it's based on a lie," I insisted. "And because I'm tired of my savings being treated as a family emergency fund." Keith's eyes narrowed. He walked over to the kitchen counter where my laptop was open, showing a bank website I hadn't had time to close when he arrived. It wasn't my main account. That would have been far too revealing, but it showed a healthy 5-figure balance, far more than the struggling accountant I was pretending to be should have had. "Savings, huh?" he said, pointing at the screen. "Looks like you're doing better than you've let on. What else are you hiding, Elaine?" My heart pounded. "That's work money," I said quickly. "A client account I'm managing. Not mine." "Really?" "Because I found something interesting when I was looking for a pen in your desk last week," he continued, his voice dangerously calm. "A statement from some investment firm I've never heard of. Showed a pretty impressive balance for someone who claims she can't help her family. The violation, him searching through my desk, barely registered against the panic of potential discovery. What had he seen? How much did he know?" "You went through my things?" I managed, trying to deflect. "Family looks out for family," he replied, unapologetic. "Except you, apparently. So what's the deal? You've been hiding money from us? Setting yourself up while pretending you're as broke as the rest of us?" The confrontation that followed was ugly. Keith demanded to know where my money had come from. I deflected, claiming it was work bonuses I'd been saving carefully. He didn't believe me. He threatened to tell the entire family I'd been holding out on them. I told him to leave. He refused. I threatened to call the police. He finally left, but not before delivering a parting shot. "We're supposed to be a family, Elaine. You've changed, and not in a good way. We all see it. Whatever you're hiding, it's not worth losing everyone who cares about you." The aftermath was painful but clarifying. My mother called, having heard Keith's version of events, to express her disappointment in me. Amber sent a text saying she couldn't believe I'd turned my back on family. My father, predictably, disappeared again once it was clear no money would be forthcoming. Aunt Linda ensured the entire extended family knew about my betrayal. For 3 weeks, I weathered accusatory texts, guilt-inducing voicemails, and social media posts, thinly disguising family drama as generic content about loyalty. I maintained my position, but the emotional toll was immense. In my weekly therapy session, Dr. Claire helped me process the conflict. "What's interesting," she observed, "is that your family's reaction has actually confirmed your concerns. Their love and acceptance appear conditional on financial support." "That's a harsh way to put it," I said, though I couldn't disagree. "Sometimes clarity is harsh," she replied. "The question now is what this means for your plans going forward." She was right. The family crisis had forced a turning point. My carefully constructed double life was cracking under pressure. Keith's discovery, though incomplete, was a warning sign that I couldn't maintain the facade much longer. That night, I made a decision. It was time to accelerate my plans for transition. I would need to create distance, both physical and emotional, from the unhealthy family dynamics that had defined so much of my life. The lottery win hadn't created these problems, but it had given me the resources to finally address them. I began making concrete plans to leave Chicago, establish a new life elsewhere, and redefine my relationships on healthier terms. What I didn't yet know was whether I would ever tell my family the full truth about my wealth, or if doing so would only make a difficult situation impossible. In the wake of the family crisis, I scheduled an emergency meeting with my financial team. We gathered in Natalie's office, my financial advisor, attorney, accountant, and therapist, to reassess my situation and develop a more comprehensive plan. "Your current strategy isn't sustainable, Rebecca," my attorney stated bluntly. "The dual life approach creates too many vulnerabilities, both legally and personally." Natalie nodded in agreement. "You've done well establishing the financial structures, but your day-to-day reality hasn't caught up. It's creating unnecessary stress and increasing the risk of discovery." We discussed options, continuing as I was but with better security measures, partially revealing my improved financial situation while hiding its true source, or making a clean break and establishing a new life elsewhere. From a psychological perspective, Dr. Claire added, "The strain of maintaining deception with people close to you takes a significant toll. The recent family conflict has highlighted underlying dysfunctional patterns that aren't likely to improve in your current environment." After hours of discussion, I made my decision. I would create a new life that aligned with my financial reality, starting with a move away from Chicago. "I need distance," I explained to the team. "Not just physical distance, but enough separation to establish boundaries and a fresh perspective." My team helped me develop a comprehensive transition plan. First, I would resign from my accounting job, giving proper notice and maintaining professional relationships. My cover story would be an opportunity to work remotely for a financial consulting firm based in Denver, a story that explained both the move and a modest improvement in lifestyle without revealing my true wealth. I began researching homes in the Denver area, focusing on properties that were comfortable but not ostentatious. I settled on a 4-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, spacious enough to enjoy, but not so luxurious it would raise eyebrows. At $850,000, it was expensive by normal standards, but barely made a dent in my fortune. To maintain my cover story, I established a home office with professional equipment and created a regular schedule of work hours. I even set up a business entity, Walker Financial Consulting, that could serve as my supposed employer while actually functioning as a vehicle for managing some of my investments. The logistics of the move were straightforward. The emotional aspects were far more complex. How would I explain this sudden life change to my family? What relationships could be salvaged, and which had been irreparably damaged by recent events? Dr. Claire and I had intensive sessions focused on my family dynamics and how to navigate this transition. "You're not just changing your address," she pointed out. "You're fundamentally shifting how you engage with your family system." We worked on establishing healthy boundaries, recognizing manipulative behaviors, and developing responses that were firm but compassionate. I practiced conversations for different scenarios, preparing for the inevitable questions and accusations. Remember, Dr. Claire emphasized, their reactions reflect their own issues and fears, not your worth or the legitimacy of your choices. As my departure date approached, I began sharing my plans selectively. I told coworkers and casual friends about the amazing opportunity I'd been offered in Denver. Most were supportive, if surprised by the sudden change. Telling my family was more difficult. I chose to do it individually rather than at a family gathering, hoping to minimize the drama. My mother was first. I met her for coffee at a neutral location and explained my decision to relocate. Denver? But why? She asked, genuinely confused. Your whole life is here. Your family is here. I need a change, I said, sticking to my prepared explanation. This job opportunity is perfect for my career growth. And Denver is beautiful. Mountains, outdoor activities, a great quality of life. Is this because of what happened with your father? With Keith? She pressed. Because we can work through that as a family. You don't need to run away. It's not about running away, I insisted, though it partially was. It's about moving towards something better for me. Her expression hardened. This isn't like you, Elaine. First the secrets, then refusing to help family, now moving away. I don't even recognize you anymore. The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with her tearful accusation that I was abandoning everyone who loves you for money and career. I left feeling both guilty and more certain than ever that I was making the right decision. Conversations with my siblings went similarly. Keith was openly hostile, convinced my move was a personal rejection of the family. Amber was performatively supportive on the surface. So brave of you to start fresh, while subtly undermining my decision. But won't you be, like, super lonely with no support system? My father, true to form, reappeared when he heard I was leaving town. He showed up at my apartment with renewed warmth and interest in my life, which quickly evolved into hints about needing help with just one more thing before I left. When I gently refused, his affection cooled noticeably. By the time moving day arrived, most of my family was either actively upset with me or performatively supportive in ways that felt hollow. It was painful but also clarifying. These reactions confirmed the conditional nature of their support. The actual move went smoothly. I hired professionals to handle everything, another luxury I carefully explained as part of my relocation package. Within a week, I was settled in my new Denver home, setting up a life that better aligned with my financial reality. For the first time, I could live comfortably without extravagance. My new home was beautiful but not flashy. I furnished it with quality pieces I truly loved, rather than the cheapest functional options. I bought a new car, a practical SUV suitable for Colorado weather, not a luxury model that would draw attention. I joined a local gym, took cooking classes, and found a hiking group, normal activities that happened to cost money I could now easily afford. Most importantly, I began building a life focused on meaning rather than survival. With financial security established, I could explore what truly mattered to me beyond just making ends meet. I continued therapy with Dr. Claire via video sessions, working through the guilt, anxiety, and identity shifts that came with my transformation. You're experiencing what psychologists call prosperity guilt, she explained. It's common among people who suddenly move from financial insecurity to abundance, especially when loved ones remain struggling. We worked on developing a healthier relationship with money, separating my worth from my bank balance while acknowledging the genuine privilege and responsibility that came with wealth. I began to see my lottery win not just as luck, but as an opportunity to create positive change, both for myself and eventually for others. During this period, I also focused on education. I read extensively about wealth management, attended webinars, and had regular meetings with my financial team. I was determined to understand every aspect of my finances rather than passively relying on advisors. As I settled into my new life, I began researching philanthropic opportunities. Having experienced financial hardship, I was particularly interested in organizations that promoted financial literacy and economic stability. I made anonymous donations to several nonprofits, with plans to become more strategically involved once I felt more secure in my new identity. Throughout this transition, I maintained limited contact with my family. I called my mother weekly, sent birthday cards, and participated in family group texts with brief, positive updates. I didn't cut them off completely, but I established clear boundaries about what I would and wouldn't discuss, particularly financial matters. 3 months into my new life, I met James at a community volunteer event. He was a software engineer who'd moved to Denver 2 years earlier for similar reasons, seeking a lifestyle change and fresh perspective. Our connection was immediate and refreshing. For the first time, I was building a relationship with someone who knew nothing about my family dynamics or financial history. Of course, this created a new challenge: how much to share about my lottery win. I decided to take it slowly, allowing him to know the public aspects of my life before revealing my secret. I wanted to be known for who I was, not what I had. As my new life took shape, I felt a growing sense of peace and possibility. The constant anxiety that had been my companion for years had faded. I slept better, laughed more easily, and found joy in simple pleasures. The money had provided security, but the real transformation came from breaking unhealthy patterns and establishing a life aligned with my values. 6 months after my move, I stood on my back deck, watching the sun set behind the mountains. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Family emergency. Call as soon as possible." My stomach tightened with familiar anxiety, but I took a deep breath and reminded myself of how far I'd come. Whatever this new crisis was, I would face it from a position of strength and clarity. The patterns were clear now, and I had the resources, both financial and emotional, to respond in healthier ways. What I didn't expect was that this particular family emergency would finally bring my secret into the open, forcing me to confront the ultimate question: could my relationship survive the truth? Almost exactly 1 year after my lottery win, the secret I'd worked so hard to protect was discovered in the most unexpected way. I was in the kitchen making coffee when my phone began buzzing incessantly with notifications. Text messages from my mother, Keith, Amber, Aunt Linda, and even relatives I rarely spoke with all arrived within minutes of each other. Before I could process what was happening, my phone rang. James, my boyfriend of 3 months. "Elaine, are you okay?" he asked, his voice concerned. "I just saw something online." "What are you talking about?" I asked, confused. "There's a news story going around. About the lottery winner from last year? Someone's claiming it's you." My blood ran cold. I quickly opened my laptop and searched for news about the Northern Illinois Trust lottery win. There it was, a local Chicago news site running a story with a headline: "Mystery Illinois Lottery Winner Identified. Chicago woman suspected of $380 million win." The article included a photo of me in the background of the original lottery press conference. A blurry image I hadn't even realized was captured. Aunt Linda, with her eagle eye for gossip, had recognized me despite the poor quality and connected the dots to my sudden lifestyle changes. The article quoted an unnamed family source, saying they were shocked and hurt that I had hidden such a blessing from those closest to me. It mentioned my move to Denver and suspicious timing around my career change. As I stared at the screen in disbelief, my doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw my mother, Keith, and Amber standing on my porch, looking determined. Somehow, they had gotten my address and flown to Denver without warning. "We need to talk," my mother said when I reluctantly opened the door. The confrontation that followed was every scenario I'd feared rolled into one overwhelming encounter. They had pieced together the evidence, my changed behavior, the timing of the lottery win, the trust structure similar to what Keith had researched online, my sudden move, the improved lifestyle. "How could you?" my mother demanded, tears streaming down her face. "Your own family? And you kept this secret? Do you know what we've been going through while you've been living in luxury?" Keith was more direct. "You're sitting on millions while Dad faced loan sharks? While Mom struggles to pay her bills? While my businesses needed just a little capital to succeed? What kind of person does that?" Amber alternated between hurt tears and calculating looks around my home, already mentally redecorating and planning the content she could create here. For a moment, I was that same anxious, guilt-ridden person who couldn't set boundaries. Then I remembered all the work I'd done, all the patterns I'd recognized, all the growth I'd achieved. "Please sit down," I said calmly. "Yes, I won the lottery last year. Yes, I chose not to tell you immediately. I had my reasons, which I'm willing to discuss. But first, I need you all to understand that showing up unannounced at my home and making demands is not acceptable." This direct approach momentarily stunned them into silence. We moved to the living room, where I laid out the boundaries for our conversation. "I'm willing to explain my decisions," I continued, "but I will not be guilted, manipulated, or pressured into financial commitments. If that's why you're here, this conversation can end now." For the next 2 hours, I explained my journey. The initial shock of winning, the research showing lottery winners who lost everything, the decision to establish financial security before making any announcements, the toxic patterns I'd observed in our family's approach to money. I was honest, but not cruel, acknowledging my own mistakes while standing firm on my right to make independent decisions about my wealth. I had prepared for this moment, though not quite in this way. With Rebecca's help, I had compiled documentation of past financial interactions with my family, the loans never repaid, the emergencies that weren't really emergencies, the patterns of manipulation. I had also prepared a presentation of the actual structures I had created to potentially benefit family members in sustainable ways. Educational trusts for nieces and nephews, matching funds for legitimate business ventures, emergency medical funds with clear guidelines. Their reactions varied wildly throughout my explanation. My mother cycled between hurt, anger, and calculation. Keith interrupted frequently, challenging my characterization of past events and insisting his business failures were due to undercapitalization, not poor planning. Amber grew increasingly focused on how my wealth could benefit her directly, dropping suggestions about partnerships and family business opportunities. When I finished speaking, my mother was the first to respond. "I understand why you might have wanted to be careful," she said, her voice measured. "But we're family, Elaine. We should share in each other's good fortune. Your father needs help with his debts, real debts, not just the loan shark story. Keith has a business plan that could really work with proper funding. Amber needs startup capital for her influencer brand. And she hesitated. I've always dreamed of retiring somewhere warm. We're not asking for everything, just what's fair." "And what's fair, in your view?" I asked. "Well," Keith jumped in, "the way I see it, there are 4 of us in the immediate family. So a quarter each makes sense. After taxes, that would be about $36 million per person." The audacity was breathtaking. No gratitude, no recognition of boundaries, just an immediate claim to what they saw as their entitlement. "That's not going to happen," I said firmly. "The money is legally mine, and I've established careful structures to manage it responsibly. What I am prepared to offer is this." I outlined my proposal: one-time gifts of $100,000 each, with the following conditions: participation in financial counseling, no requests for additional funds for at least 2 years, and respectful boundaries around my privacy and decisions. Additionally, I had established specific purpose-driven funds they could apply to access education expenses for actual degree programs, matching funds for legitimate business ventures with proper business plans, medical emergency funds for documented health crises. "This is insulting," Keith said immediately. "You're treating us like children who can't be trusted." "Past behavior has demonstrated that trust needs to be rebuilt," I replied evenly. "These structures protect everyone, including yourselves." The negotiation that followed was tense and revealing. My mother, seeing that I wouldn't be persuaded to simply hand over millions, became more conciliatory, expressing hurt about the secrecy, but willingness to accept my terms. Keith vacillated between outrage and tactical agreement, clearly planning to find loopholes later. Amber focused entirely on how she could maximize her benefit, particularly through the business matching funds. By evening, we had reached an uneasy compromise. They would return to Chicago, consider my offer, and we would reconvene via video call with my attorney present to formalize any agreements. No immediate cash would change hands, a boundary I held firmly despite emotional pressure. After they left for their hotel, I sat alone in my living room, emotionally exhausted but strangely peaceful. The secret was out. The confrontation I'd feared had happened, and I had maintained my boundaries. Whatever came next, I had stood my ground in a way my pre-lottery self never could have. The following months brought significant changes to my family relationships. As expected, they splintered into different responses to my boundaries. My mother, after initial resistance, eventually accepted the terms of my offer. She used her gift to pay off debts and make a down payment on a smaller, more manageable home. She participated in financial counseling, somewhat reluctantly, but acknowledged it was helpful. Our relationship remained strained but gradually improved as she adjusted to our new dynamic. Keith refused my conditions entirely at first, convinced he could change my mind through persistent pressure. When that failed, he attempted legal action, claiming I had promised financial support for his businesses before the lottery win. The lawsuit was quickly dismissed, but it created a rift that seemed unbridgeable. We stopped speaking entirely for nearly a year. Amber, ever adaptable, embraced the opportunity to access the business matching funds. She developed an actual business plan for her influencer brand, worked with the financial advisors I provided, and built a surprisingly viable content creation company. Our relationship became more transactional, but less emotionally volatile. My father drifted in and out as always, occasionally attempting to circumvent my established boundaries, but showing little interest in the responsibility that came with my conditions. I maintained a cordial but distant relationship with him, accepting his nature while protecting myself from its consequences. The extended family divided along similar lines. Some relatives respected my boundaries and maintained healthy relationships. Others, primarily those who had viewed me as a financial resource, grew distant when it became clear I wouldn't be an open checkbook. Aunt Linda, ironically, became one of my strongest allies after I funded her granddaughter's college education through my education trust. One particularly meaningful reconciliation came about 6 months after the confrontation. Keith, facing another business failure and having exhausted other options, reluctantly agreed to my conditions. He attended financial counseling, worked with a business mentor I provided, and developed a more sustainable approach to entrepreneurship. Our relationship began to heal, slowly and imperfectly, but with genuine progress. 3 years after winning the lottery, my life had found a new equilibrium. I maintained my home in Denver but traveled frequently, both for pleasure and for the philanthropic work that had become increasingly important to me. I had established a foundation focusing on financial literacy for young adults, funded scholarships for first-generation college students, and supported community development initiatives in underserved areas. My relationship with James had deepened into a genuine partnership. After careful consideration, I had shared the full truth about my lottery win 6 months into our relationship. His response, concern about how it affected me rather than excitement about the money itself, confirmed what I had come to believe about his character. We were now discussing marriage, with a prenuptial agreement that protected my assets while ensuring his comfort and independence. My family relationships continued to evolve, with ongoing adjustments and occasional setbacks. The most significant change was in my own approach. I no longer felt responsible for solving everyone's problems, no longer guilty about setting boundaries, no longer anxious about potential conflicts. I could engage with love and generosity from a place of strength rather than obligation. One surprisingly positive outcome was my sister Amber's transformation. The structure and mentorship provided through my business matching program had helped her develop genuine entrepreneurial skills. Her content creation company had become legitimately successful, focusing on financial literacy for young women, partially inspired, she admitted, by observing my journey. During a visit to Denver, Amber and I had a conversation that would have been impossible in our previous dynamic. "You know," she said as we hiked in the foothills near my home. I was so angry when I found out about the lottery. I felt betrayed. But looking back, if you had just handed me millions right away, you'd have your own reality show by now? I suggested with a smile. She laughed. Probably. And I'd be miserable. Having to work for it. Having to prove my business plan was viable. Having to learn actual skills. It was the best thing that could have happened. Don't get me wrong. I still think you could have told us sooner. But I understand why you didn't. That evening, reflecting on our conversation, I realized how profoundly the lottery had changed my life. Not through the money itself, but through what it had revealed about my relationships, my boundaries, and my own worth. The wealth had been a catalyst, bringing underlying patterns into sharp relief and giving me the resources to address them. I had learned that money doesn't create character, it reveals it. I had discovered that true support means helping people develop capability, not dependency. I had found that genuine relationships survive when based on mutual respect rather than financial exchange. And perhaps most importantly, I had learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary for authentic generosity. The lottery hadn't solved all my problems. In some ways, it had created new ones. But it had given me the freedom to live authentically, to help others meaningfully, and to break generational patterns of financial dysfunction. For that, despite all the challenges, I remained profoundly grateful. As I watched the sunset from my deck that evening, I thought about how far I'd come from that stunned, overwhelmed person sitting in her car outside a 7-Eleven, staring at a winning ticket. The money had changed my circumstances, but the journey had transformed me, and that transformation, not the millions in my accounts, was the real win. Sometimes, the best thing money can buy is the truth about the people in your life, and the courage to act on that truth. Have you ever thought about what you would do if you suddenly came into a large sum of money? Would you tell everyone immediately? Or would you keep it to yourself while you made a plan? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found my story valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more about navigating life's unexpected turns. Share this video with someone who might be struggling with family boundaries. Sometimes the most important stories are the ones that help us realize we're not alone in our challenges. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth isn't determined by your bank account or what you can provide for others, but by the boundaries you set and the integrity with which you live your life.